Hey, I'm Dr. Jorgensen from Frontier Pediatrics, and I'm here with my partner,
Dr. Corinne.
and we're here to talk about sex. Okay, let's talk about middle school because a lot of stuff starts going down in middle school.
So tell me about your experience raising a boy
Oh yeah.
through puberty, middle school.
Yeah, we're still kind of in the middle of it. I felt a lot more comfortable talking with my daughter about puberty and about sex and all of those things. I think because being female and having experienced them on my own versus like all the like scientific doctory stuff I could talk about, but those more intimate experiences, it's been a little bit harder, and definitely I think I've leaned a little bit
I was
more
gonna say,
on
did you pull on your
Brian.
husband?
But he's kind of funny. He's like, you're the one that knows this. You're the one that should. So we kind of both
So
talk.
what kind of intimate experiences are you referring to?
So for girls, it's kind of easy to mark that midway point of puberty. For girls, it's their periods, and that pretty
Like the
much
onset.
is that onset of periods is like that midpoint. Yay! And it's something to kind of be like a mark to be celebrated. Like literally, when Ella started her period, we made a red velvet cake and we had a period party for the whole family. Ian very much knew his sister had started her period, and we were like, this is something to be celebrated. Like, this is awesome for her. Good job. And she was like so cute and so embarrassed and so proud also at the same time. But I think it also made it comfortable so that she could talk to Brian about things, and she could be like, Dad, I need you to pick this up for me at the store.
I have the best picture of my husband and my daughter getting tampons together.
Yes. So what was awesome about doing a period cake for Ella was we had this opportunity to kind of celebrate her, but I think it also was an opportunity to build empathy for Ian, and so that he could like celebrate this kind of milestone in puberty for his sister and give him some compassion and some empathy for her and the physical things she was going through, as well as like some of those emotional things. But on the flip side, I don't think we've done that for Ian. Like, I'm not gonna do a like
Wet dream cake,
right? Like I didn't, and I know he's having wet dreams, so we kind of passed that. So, but I feel like that was a missed opportunity because I really want Ella to be able to have that same type of empathy for him and for what he's physically going through as he's going through puberty. And especially too with some of those like the big emotions, those ups and downs that boys have. Because for girls, it's like emotions, but it's kind of this like pedal to the metal and this kind of constant. For boys, it's like up and then down and then up and then down and then up and then down.
With no phase of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a period.
No,
I feel like
in
I
between.
Need to rage.
No, they're just
Right.
like, I feel like a normal person, and then I'm the Hulk, and I want to rage and beat everything. At least that's kind of, I mean, that's what I see in my own son as he's having these testosterone
Do you feel
surges.
like you get, it seems like I get a lot of kids in that 9 to 12, 13-year-old range where they're like, oh my gosh, my kid has behavioral issues. They're oppositional, blah,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Where likely like, yes, there may be this, that, but there's a huge component of that
100%.
that probably parents don't attribute
Right.
to those hormonal fluctuations, but more of like, my kid needs meds.
Right. As a culture, we, like, boys can talk, like, you know, bathroom jokes and sex jokes and stuff like that, but we don't actually give boys space to have vulnerable conversations about how their emotions feel, or how they maybe feel angry, or how they maybe feel uncomfortable in their body, or how it feels maybe really weird that they're having these wet dreams and they maybe feel dirty, or they feel shamed about them, or they feel, do you know what I mean? What I'm trying to, I feel like
Yeah.
for girls, we give them space, a better space to have emotions and to talk about it and to feel this way. But I think we do our boys a disservice by not being more open in the same manner. Being female, I'm relying on my husband a little bit more being male to try to have those kind of conversations. And he's leaning more on me being female to have those conversations with my daughter. If we haven't been given good tools from our parents to have those conversations, then we're kind of set up to fail when it's that next level of conversation.
So you had mentioned that you're open about talking about pornography in the office, but less open about talking about wet dreams. What's that perspective?
Okay. I think I have to go backwards, and I have to tell you a little about my own experience with learning about puberty and learning about sex from my parents. And God bless my mom. She's sweet. My mom was very uncomfortable talking about all of these things with me. And I'm sure probably my grandma wasn't, and grandpa weren't very comfortable talking with her about it, right? So, but I specifically remember driving in the car. We were driving out of town, so we were in the car for a couple of hours, and it was just she and I, and she had a cassette tape that she put in, and she was like, Jenny, you need to learn about these things, so we're going to listen to this tape together. And so she puts this cassette tape in and hits play and starts playing, and it's this person on a cassette tape that's telling me about puberty and is telling me about sex. And like my mom couldn't even talk to me about it. And she like it was like, okay, there you go, that's all you need. And then specifically, there was one section that she fast forwarded through. And I remember as a kid being like, well, what's she fast forwarding through? What's this section? And in hindsight, I'm like, I never learned about masturbation. Fairly certain that the section that she fast forwarded through was a masturbation section. So I have all of these like innate, I think, learned kind of like, uncomfortableness with it, and then also, just kind of values and the way that masturbation is looked at, I think, in some cultures and some perspectives. So I have that coming in, but I have no problem talking with kids about pornography and the impact of pornography on sexual health and development, which is just so funny that I have this like weird thing. But here's what I tell kids about pornography, and I think this is really good. So there's actually multiple studies that have found that the more pornography that especially people in their teens and 20s, when they're still having a developing brain, the more pornography they observe, the more amount of sexual dysfunction they'll have. And specifically, when they've looked at it, it's not like photography style porn. It is video pornography. There's like a direct correlation between time spent observing video pornography and sexual dysfunction in males and females. And the thought is it has to do with that part of the brain that's developing and learning what triggers arousal. And so it's being aroused by this video image and these extremes, right? Extremes and video images. So then when you have a live, beautiful, wonderful human being in front of you, your brain doesn't know to be aroused because it has been trained to be aroused by a video, not a live person. I want kids to be happy and healthy, and part of being a happy and healthy adult is having a happy, healthy sexual life. And I don't want them to set themselves up for having sexual dysfunction by spending too much time looking at pornography in these middle school, high school, college age.
When you have that discussion, are the parents in the room with that discussion?
Yes, and I would say most of the time the parents are like big-eyed, and they're like nodding, and I get actually a lot of really positive reinforcement from parents. I don't think I've ever had a parent that's been not positive about that, actually. But I don't talk to them about masturbation. And I feel like masturbation is, there's a level of it that's part of how you discover your body and how you discover part of how your body works and part of sexual arousal. So I think that there's this a bit of healthy side of that. And definitely it can become an unhealthy thing. But I think that there's a lot of healthiness to that we kind of, by not talking about it and not including it in sex ed with our kids, we're not giving them anything. In the same way, if we don't talk to them about sex, they're more likely to have sex at a younger age, right? If we don't talk to them about masturbation, they're more likely to engage in those things in an unhealthy manner rather than a healthy manner.
There's appropriate places and appropriate times.
Right.
Right. But that.
Right. We're not in the living room.
Right.
We're not in public.
Right. But but it's a normal part of development, and to not be stressed about it.
Yeah. My sweet mom shouldn't have fast forwarded through masturbation. Hey, thanks so much for watching this educational video. I hope it was helpful. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to us at Frontier Peds. You can call us or you can go to our website.